Democratic presidential candidate Chris Dodd wants U.S. troops out of Iraq, and he wants to get tough with what he calls America's other enemies. Who are they, and what does he have in mind? And will it help him become president? We'll ask Connecticut Senator and presidential contender Chris Dodd. That's next on Face to Face. Welcome to Face to Face. I'm Jon Ralston. Thanks to that presidential caucus early here next year, Nevada's playing host to yet another presidential hopeful. U.S. Senator Chris Dodd is in town, part of his kitchen cabinet tour. He joins us to talk about Iraq, immigration, and much more. Welcome back to the program, Senator.
Thank you, John. Good to be back with you.
You're going to Pahrump later?
Going to go Pahrump tonight?
We'll talk a little bit about that in a little while. But first, let's talk about Iraq. It's what's dominating the conversation in the primary and probably in this country. You recently gave a very long speech about Iraq where you laid out some ideas, and you also talked about those ideas recently with Wolf Blitzer on CNN. Let me show you what you had to say. I have a view that we ought to begin redeploying immediately. I'm the only candidate that I know of that's supporting the Feingold-Reed proposal, which says on March 31st of 2008, with a safe redeployment of our forces out of Iraq, we ought to end this conflict. This has gone on way too long. Now, you know that your friend John McCain disagrees with you on this, and he told an audience at VMI about calls to withdraw like yours from Iraq. Many in Washington have called for an end to our involvement in Iraq, yet they offer no opinion about the consequences of this course of action. It's all well and good to say we should leave by March 31st. What happens then?
Well, I think that no one can say for certain. What I do know for certain is the longer we stay, we're less secure, less safe, and there's less likelihood, in my view, that the Iraqis are going to achieve that political accommodation that everyone talks about, where they come together and decide they're going to be a nation state. Everyone's been talking about that from day one. I think we're further away from that occurring. And frankly, I believe that our presence in Iraq is contributing to that distancing between those various sides in terms of coming to some sort of accommodation as to whether or not they want to.
In what way? Because we're an occupier and they see us that way now?
I think so. There's a lot to do with it. You put down, you know, these, in fact, you talk to the troops coming back from there, and they'll tell you that 60% of the Iraqis believe it's okay to shoot Americans. 80% think we're the cause of the chaos in their country. So I can't sit here and tell you with absolute certainty what's going to happen. But I believe there's a greater likelihood that if we make it clear that we're beginning to redeploy and when we're going to be leaving, that they will get far more serious, potentially, about coming to that accommodation than they will if they believe we're going to stay there in perpetuity.
But no one's saying that, Senator, but no one's saying we're going to stay there in perpetuity, are they?
Well, in a sense, there's a worry that that's where we're headed with all of this. And frankly, the longer this goes on, the further it deteriorates. You've had 2 million Iraqis that have left the country. 1 million more are displaced here. Communities that are vacant today. People have had to leave because of the secular violence that's occurring in the country. So here you have the parliament being blown up inside the green zone in the last 24 hours. What are people thinking of here? Does anyone really believe that in a city of 6 million people, that 18 to 20,000 troops are going to make a difference separating 24 militias who are determined every day to wipe each other out? At some point, based on what everyone else has said, from Baker Hamilton, senior military people, everyone I've ever talked to over there believes there's no military solution to the problems in Iraq. Why is it we have a hard time understanding that and don't try something different, and that is to try the surge in diplomacy and politics that people have recommended?
It seems like the division now between the Democrats, especially some of the Democrats running for president, the administration is growing more and more stark. In fact, the vice president today gave a speech in Chicago to a pretty friendly group, I would guess, the Heritage Foundation. Here's what he had to say. Americans are entitled to question whether the endlessly shifting positions that Senator Reid and others are taking are reflections of principle or of partisanship and blind opposition to the president. Senator Reid has threatened that if the president vetoes the timetable legislation, he will send up Senator Russ Feingold's bill to defund Iraqi operations altogether. Yet only last November, Senator Reid said there'd be no cutoff of funds for the military in Iraq. So, in less than 6 months' time, Senator Reid has gone from pledging full funding for the military, then full funding, but with a timetable, and then a cutoff of funding. These positions in 5 months on the most important foreign policy question facing our country and our troops. Isn't the vice president right to the extent that the Democrats seem to have an evolving position on funding the troops, defunding the troops, what to do, what not to do?
Well, first of all, I found myself almost gagging to hear the vice president talk about his concern for the troops. This is an administration that didn't provide the body armor, the armoring up of the vehicles on the ground, Building 18 in Walter Reed has not left the memory of an awful lot of veterans. The fact that we don't have the funds even to support them when they've come back in too many cases, had to find supplemental services and some funds to back them up here. The uniformed services disregard for the civilian leadership under this administration at the Pentagon is palpable. So to hear the Vice President talk about how much he cares about the troops there, frankly, is troublesome. Now, no one believes for a single second that you can't separate your opposition to a policy and your willingness and ability to support whatever our troops are going to need. The idea that we're going to have to sustain this policy indefinitely because if we don't do so, that you're going to put the troops in jeopardy, doesn't make any sense at all to me. We can clearly have an opposition to the policy, stop funding the policy, and provide whatever our troops need during that period of redeployment. None of us are ever going to put those troops at risk or at jeopardy.
Now, using the troops is a classic political maneuver.
Exactly.
Why not just defund it now, though? Why not? If you're really principled and saying get out of Iraq, do that, the troops would have to come home, wouldn't they?
Well, it would, but obviously you need time to do that, and you need to be able to set it up and do it properly, and there are leaders in the military know how to do that. The point, I think, again, what Harry Reid has made, and I support, and Russ Feingold have recommended, is what is missing here is clarity. John, the country is so far ahead of the politicians on this issue. It is incredible how far ahead the country is, and not just Democrats, Republicans and independents. $2 billion a week, $8 billion a month, $400 billion in 4 years. There's not a treasury big enough or an army big enough that's going to provide the political conciliation in that country. They're going to have to decide this for themselves. It's time for us really to speak with one clear voice. We have done what we can to provide that opportunity for them. They now have to make that decision.
When we come back, let's talk about that speech you gave and what foreign policy under President Chris Dodd would be like. Be back with Senator Dodd when Face to Face returns.
And he never got a nickel for it. He never patented the thing.
Hey, will you guys do me a favor? Just so I don't get too engrossed in that soap opera while I'm talking to the senator, could you turn off that TV?
I'm not doing well here. I got down.
I'm going to put up 1, 7. That'll probably be enough for this segment, okay?